Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back, everybody, to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. I'm going to say this outright, and as we're going to introduce today's show, that we need more community-minded leaders in government. That we need those who are wanting to join the community's networks and government officials be elected for the reason that they want to help the community grow and help solve issues and create solutions that help people live better. There are politicians out there who do believe in just that. And eventually we're going to hear from President Joe Biden as he's speaking to a community of people about just that, how he can be the community leader to help us bring solutions to issues that are happening in local communities. What many people don't know about President Joe Biden, and we're going to hear this again, is that he started out as a local official, city council, county council, as I think it actually was. And from there he moved on to spending almost 30 years in the Senate before he became Vice President and then President of the United States. We need more people who think about community, to think about just the person who is trying to make a living and trying to have a good life. They want a little more than just get by. They're not trying to grab a hold of a lot of greed for power, for money or anything. They just want a simple life. And a simple way of life for their children and their families. We need more representatives in government that think that way. And we need fewer who are after the cash grab, the power grab, and the control. The control in a democratic republic belongs to the people, not to the government. So we should see more transparency in government, and we should see more opportunities to vote on the solutions for issues instead of having them just handed to us by an official. Okay, so we're going to hear from Joe Biden, and we're going to hear how he's accomplishing these things through his own campaigning and his own administration and what he has done in the United States. We're also going to hear from António Guterres as he's calling once again for a ceasefire. We're coming up to the Ramadan season, and we're also eventually going to be coming towards Passover. And we need to find ways to put a ceasefire in Gaza, put a ceasefire between Palestine and Israel. Not just a temporary ceasefire, but a permanent solution that allows both countries to live peacefully and have control over the land itself. That chunk of real estate that we call the Holy Land, that's where all this is happening. And we need to find ways to bring it to peace, to negotiate a peace where the hostages that were taken on October 7th are set free and returned to their families, and that Palestine can start to rebuild what was destroyed after massive Israeli attacks. So we'll hear from António Guterres as he calls for that ceasefire. And of course, we always have to talk about clean energy whenever we can. And how do we build clean energy, and how do we do it in a way that is community-minded and not just another power trip to grab more money for the government and utilities? So we're going to hear how things are going towards that in Ontario, as the Liberal federal government is backing efforts that are happening in Ontario towards a clean power grid for that province. So why don't we get started, and let's go to hear what Mr. Joe Biden has to say as President of the United States and a community-minded politician.
All right. Well, a big thank you to this administration for their commitment in helping local leaders get the resources they need to do the important work done in their cities. We really appreciate the support. We're able to achieve so much more when we work in partnership with one another. Now, I know we have all been eagerly awaiting this moment. So everyone, it is my great honor to introduce you to our final speaker for the day, or next to final speaker for the day, who we are so lucky to have join us this morning. Like so many of our speakers today, his roots are in local government, where he first got started in public service as a county council member in Newcastle, Delaware in the 1970s. At age 29, he became one of the youngest people ever elected to the United States Senate, where he served for 36 years. And in 2009, he began his 8-year tenure as Vice President of the United States alongside President Barack Obama. And as we all know, in 2020, he was elected to the highest office in our nation. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for the one, the only President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Although I didn't realize that guy's a PhD. This guy's a pretty smart guy. Please have a seat if you have one. It's so great to see you all. The mayor mentioned I started off with the county council. That's what I learned early on, that if you want to get something done locally, send it directly to the local officials. Don't have to go through, you don't have to pass go. You don't have to go to state legislature to compete for the money. Folks, I only ran for the Senate because local government was too hard. You all think I'm kidding. They know where you live. They think you can solve every problem, even if you don't have the authority to do it, and they hold you accountable for everything. So God love you, as my mother would say. Thank you all for being here, and congratulations to the National League of Cities. 100 years. Now, I want to make it clear, I've been a strong supporter here, but I wasn't at the first meeting. I wasn't. Swear to God. I've been around a while, but we first came together on a college campus in Kansas at a time of transformation in America. Cities and towns were growing fast. Our economy was changing and was pushed to transparency and reform and efficiency, a big push. And you help one another deliver for folks ever since that time. Because, I mean, look, think about it, all kidding aside. People come to you first in your communities. They knock on your door. They expect you to be able to, ask them, is my neighborhood safe? Will the bus be on time? Are you going to have them run on so I can get to work on time? My kid's going to have a good fortune of being able to stay in their hometown and make a living. You do what matters. You do what matters to people. My dad used to say, a job's about a lot more than a paycheck. It's about your dignity. It's about your ability to look your kid in the eye and say everything's going to be okay. They look to you first. That's why I feel my administration with so many former local officials, like Councilman Tom Perez, who you just heard here speak in a minute, and he runs this show for me in the White House. Former Mayor Steve Benjamin, Secretaries Buttigieg, Fudge, Vilsack. We know what you all do and what a measure of success is and how many partisan points you score. It's a basic thing we've all got involved in the first place for. Can you fix the problem? Can we fix the problem? Can we be responsive? We're here for one reason, to deliver to families and communities for the country. You've been essential partners in delivering historic results for the American people. When I ran, I know it sounded silly, I said I promised to be president for all Americans, whether they voted for me or not. And we're making that real progress in red communities and blue communities. In fact, there are more investments going to red communities than blue communities. It's about politics in many people's mind, but not mine. It's about investing in all of America and all Americans, so everyone has a fair shot. And leaving nobody behind. When I came to office, the pandemic was raging. Our economy was reeling. Communities everywhere faced devastating budget cuts. We turned things around. 3 years ago today, I signed the American Rescue Plan. Instead of just helping a few big cities, we provided $350 billion to state and local governments for you to decide how it would be spent. Money went directly to every single town in America so you could decide how best to spend it without having to go through the State House or a governor. We trusted you, and that trust has been well placed because you've done a hell of a job. Use those funds to vaccinate your communities, to keep essential services going. Put cops on the beat. You put teachers in the classroom. You kept small businesses on their feet and families in their homes. Then I proposed and signed the most significant investment in our nation's infrastructure in generations. 47,000 new projects announced so far across communities, modernizing American roads, bridges, ports, airports, public transit, and more. Creating jobs now and jobs for the next decade. We went through, remember we had Infrastructure Week for 4 years? Now you're going to have Infrastructure Week for 10 years, only every week there's going to be something every week. Look, I stood with mayors out where you're rebuilding. The Blatnick Bridge in Wisconsin, Minnesota, $1 billion operation. The Brent Spence Bridge in Kentucky and Ohio, By the way, not only changing the economy for those communities and all up and down the coast, up and down the country, but it's doing something else. It's generating really good jobs, and it's bringing communities back together. And working with many of you, we're replacing every poisonous lead pipe in America for every child can drink clean water without risk of brain damage. In January, I was in Raleigh, North Carolina, where we're investing $3 billion to connect the entire state for affordable high-speed internet to end by the end of the decade. And we're doing it in all 50 states. It's critical for children to be able to do their homework, small businesses to be able to sell their products, folks to have access to telemedicine when they're driving, without driving to see their doctors if they live in the countryside. We've already saved 23 million families $75 a month on internet bills. Congress needs to reauthorize that program now, by the way. I need your help. We're also taking the most significant action to fight climate change ever. You know, I mentioned when we talked, well, I won't get started on all that. I feel pretty passionate about it. Look, I visited many of your towns as we work together to respond, rebuild, and increase reliance and resilience. But the resilience is the important part. We can't build back to what it was. We've got to build back better in everything we're doing, for real. The climate's already changed things. Resilience to extreme weather, revitalization of fence-lined communities smothered by the legacy of pollution. We're also promoting clean energy, advanced manufacturing, and other industries, a future that's made in America. You know, there used to be there's a law that I didn't even realize, and most didn't realize, that back in the 30s when they were talking about whether the unions could exist and so on and so forth, there was a lot of legislation in the Roosevelt administration. One law that got passed was any money sent to the president to spend on a federal project should be spent with American products and American workers. Well, here's what happened. A lot of folks, both parties, didn't pay much attention to that, but not anymore. We build American, we buy American, and we are American. Folks, thanks in part to the CHIPS and Science Act, the United States is investing more money in research and development than ever before. During the pandemic, a shortage of semiconductor chips about the size of the tip of your little finger drove prices up for everything, from cell phones to automobiles. Well, instead of having to import semiconductors, which America invented, I might add, private companies are now investing billions of dollars to build new chip factories here in America. We're creating tens of thousands of jobs. Many of them pay over $100,000 a year and do not require a college degree. Folks, in all, my policies have attracted $650 billion in private sector investments from companies that are bringing jobs back to America, back to communities where they belong. For the longest time, both parties sent jobs overseas because the labor was cheaper and imported the products. Now we're sending product overseas and we're bringing the jobs back here. Look, folks, in thousands of cities and towns, we're seeing a great comeback story. Nearly 15 million new jobs created so far. That's a record. Growth is strong, wages are rising, inflation is down. Individuals have filed to start an additional 16 million new businesses since I took office. Each application to do that is an act of hope. Along the way, we reduced the federal deficit, I might add. It hasn't gone up, it's gone down under us. We cut it by $1 trillion already, another $1 trillion over the next decade, and that's my goal, to cut by $3 trillion by making the wealthy and big corporations finally begin to pay their fair share. Folks, look, I'm a capitalist. If you can make $1 billion, wonderful. Just pay your fair share, man. Not 8.2%. If you paid 25%, we'd have $500 billion more over the next 10 years to cut the deficit, to provide child care, to do all the things we need to do. But there's more to do. Look, for example, I know the cost of housing is critical to families nationwide. If inflation keeps coming down, mortgage rates are going to continue to come down as well. But I'm not waiting. For those seeking to buy their first home or trade up for a little more space, I propose a tax cut that will provide $400 a month for the next 2 years. Because every family deserves a place to call home and a place to have your American dreams come true. Look, millions of renters are also out there in trouble. We're also cracking down on those landlords who break the antitrust laws by price fixing those rents. Landlords should be competing to give folks the best deal, not conspiring to charge them higher rent. We also cut red tape so more builders can get federal financing, which is already helping construct a record 1.7 million new housing units nationwide. Because of you. And the federal budget that I'm releasing today has a plan for 2 million more affordable homes, including housing, a housing innovation fund to help communities like yours build housing, renovate housing, and convert empty office space and hotels into housing. Housing for renters, for owners, middle-class families, and folks struggling just to get by. Look, and we realize many of you are dealing with homeless encampments in your cities and towns. Well, we're providing $8 billion to allow you to provide alternatives, to move unhoused people off the street, getting them into homes. The bottom line is we have to build, build, build. That's how we bring housing costs down for good. Folks, at the same time, America deserves the freedom to be safe from crime. And America is safer today than when I took office. Starting with the American Rescue Plan, I made the biggest investment in public safety effort, and you used it well. You, all of you, have done a tremendous job in your communities putting those resources to work. Using federal money to hire more officers for effective, accountable community policing. Expanding violence intervention programs to help prevent crime. Folks, we don't always hear about it, but today's violent crime rates are down nationwide, nearly every major category, to one of the lowest levels in over 50 years. But there's more to do. But we're making American progress, serious progress. Look, there's another piece of unfinished business, the border, the federal border we keep talking about. In November, my team began serious negotiations with a bipartisan group of senators led by a very serious conservative Republican senator, as well as Democrats. The result was a compromise bill with the toughest border security reforms this country has ever seen. That bipartisan deal would hire 1,500 more border security agents and officers, 100 more immigration judges to help tackle a backlog of 2 million cases that are just waiting to be heard, 4,300 more asylum officers, and new policies so they can resolve cases in 6 months instead of 6 years. 100 more high-tech drug detection machines to significantly increase our ability to stop fentanyl from being smuggled in America. By the way, no one questions those numbers. This bill would save lives, bring order to the border. It has the funds that many of our cities badly need as well. It would also give me, as president, new emergency authority or any other president, temporarily shut down the border when a number of immigrants is overwhelming it to regain control of the border. Border Patrol Union endorsed it. The Federal Chamber, the National Chamber of Commerce endorsed it. And I believe, given an opportunity, the House and Senate have the votes to pass it if they just bring it to the floor and vote on it. But up to now, politics has intervened. Folks, we have to end the games. We have to deal. This deal is about a win for America. Your cities and towns. You all face the issue every single day. So it matters to you, your community, to tell your members in Congress to show up, show a little spine, and pass the bipartisan border security bill. You tell me I'm your last speaker. I've already kept you too long, but here's a go. Let me close with this. Last week, I delivered my State of the Union address, where I said, I stated what I believe to be the empirical truth. The State of the Union is strong and getting stronger. That's what I see. As I travel the country, folks often tell me how back in 2020 they were down. They'd lost their business. They'd lost their faith in the system. And then the laws we passed, the work we've done together, got them back on their feet, creating new jobs, new businesses, a new cycle of hope. We've got a long way to go in terms of, and by the way, public confidence in the economy is coming back. So when you see shovels in the ground, people going to work, I hope you feel what we do, and you feel it with a sense of pride. Pride in your hometown, pride in making a comeback, pride in America, pride in knowing we can get big things done when we work together. Folks, as I said, I've been around a few days. But I've never been more optimistic about our future, and I mean that sincerely. We just have to remember who in God's name we are. We are the United States of America, for God's sake. There is nothing beyond our capacity. I mean nothing beyond our capacity when we work together like you all do. So let's work together. God bless you all. May God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Really, thank you. You've been great. Time to do the job.
United Nations Secretary General António Guterres.
Good morning. Today marks the start of the holy month of Ramadan, a period when Muslims around the world celebrate and spread the values of peace, reconciliation, and solidarity. Yet, even though Ramadan has begun, the killing, bombing, and bloodshed continue in Gaza. We recently entered the 6th month since the Hamas terror attacks in Israel and the catastrophic Israel onslaught in Gaza began. My strongest appeal today is to honor the spirit of Ramadan by silencing the guns and removing all obstacles to ensure the delivery of life-saving aid at the speed and massive scale required. At the same time, and in the Ramadan spirit of compassion, I call for the immediate release of all hostages. The eyes of the world are watching. The eyes of history are watching. We cannot look away. We must act to avoid more preventable death. We have witnessed months after months of civilian killing and destruction at a level that is unprecedented in all my years as Secretary General. Meanwhile, life-saving relief for Palestinians in Gaza is coming in trickles, if it comes at all. International humanitarian law lies in tatters, and the threatened Israeli assault on Rafah could plummet the people of Gaza into an even deeper circle of hell. For months, leaders have appealed for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire and the immediate release of all hostages. But the most compelling calls have come from the families of the victims of this war. I've never forget my meetings with them, and they have stood at this very podium and addressed you, united in remarkable courage and unfathomable pain. Israeli hostage families who shared their torment and anguish and pleaded for the immediate release of their loved ones, and Palestinian families who shared heart-wrenching testimonies of family members killed in Israeli bombardments and pleaded for an immediate ceasefire. As one of those family members said, and I quote, "We are not here for condolences. We are not here for apologies. We are here for immediate action." Is that too much to ask? We must hear and heed those voices. Desperate civilians need action, immediate action. Today, I also renew my appeal for a Ramadan cessation of hostilities in Sudan. The fighting there must end for the sake of the Sudanese people who face hunger, horrors, and untold hardships. In Gaza, in Sudan, and beyond, it's time for peace. I call on political, religious, and community leaders everywhere to do everything in their power to make this holy period a time for empathy, action, and peace. Let's not forget that beyond Ramadan, Christians will soon celebrate Easter, and Jews will celebrate Passover in April. It's time to end the terrible suffering. Now it's the time to do it, and I thank you.
The Liberal government is supporting Ontario's efforts towards a clean energy grid.
Thank you very much. Bonjour tout le monde. Bienvenue. C'est un plaisir d'être ici aujourd'hui. I would like to just begin by acknowledging that we are meeting on the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe peoples. It is great to be here alongside my friend and counterpart, Minister Smith from Ontario, with whom I seem to be sharing the stage a lot these last couple of weeks. Also pleased certainly to be joined by Lesley Gallinger for this conversation. I would like to thank Lesley and her team here for the invitation to come to the facility and for the critical work they do each and every day on behalf of Ontarians. Certainly you folks have a very critical job. You can see some of that just on the screens beside us in terms of managing the electricity system and ensuring that there is a reliable source of electricity for the 15 million plus Ontarians on a day-to-day basis, but also in terms of planning for the long-term requirements on the electricity side. As Ontarians start to, in increasing numbers, plug in electric vehicles, ride electrified public transit, switch to electric heat pumps in their homes, and as Ontario businesses move towards electrification as a way to reduce their own carbon emissions, we need more clean power. And we need that fast. En fait, des analyses crédibles indiquent que nos systèmes électriques devront être 2 à 3 fois plus grands qu'aujourd'hui pour répondre à l'augmentation significative de la demande qui accompagnera la transformation énergétique mondiale. And clean electricity isn't just a necessity because of rising demand. Increasingly, businesses are making access to clean electricity as a prerequisite for investment in this province and in other provinces and territories in this country. Certainly, the success that Ontario has enjoyed with respect to battery manufacturing and electric vehicle manufacturing is a good proof point of that. Volkswagen picked Canada over the United States to build their EV gigafactory in large part, because of this province's low carbon electricity grid. Cependant, nous ne pouvons pas nous reposer sur nos lauriers. Building a grid that is 2 or 3 times larger than it is today is a huge undertaking. It also has to be a grid that is affordable for consumers and businesses. It has to be reliable over the course of the weeks and months all through the year. And it has to be clean, increasingly has to be clean. This is such a monumental task. I often say to folks, I actually think this is the biggest task facing us going forward. And in fact, it is kind of our century's equivalent of building the railways across this country. It is something that is such a monumental task that is not something I think that any province and territory is likely to be able to accomplish on their own, that collaboration between levels of government is extremely important. And in that regard, we have endeavored to work very collaboratively with the Government of Ontario in a number of ways to assist it in its aspirations with respect to the electricity grid. Just last week, we announced together, Todd and I, $50 million in federal funding through our electricity pre-development program for prep work to support Bruce Power in assessing up to 4,800 megawatts of new nuclear generation. We invested through the Canada Infrastructure Bank $1 billion in supporting the work that is being done at the Darlington facility, which is an enormously important demonstration of small modular reactor technology, something that I will tell you everywhere I go in the world, people ask me about, and the eyes of the world are on Darlington. We have introduced a clean electricity grid, clean electricity ITC, which was announced in last year's budget and will be formalized this fall, which provides a 15% refundable tax credit for investments in all forms of clean electricity generation across the country. That certainly includes nuclear, including refurbishments. Cela comprend l'éolien, le solaire, l'hydroélectricité, le nucléaire et le gaz aux émissions réduites, ainsi que le stockage et le transmission de l'énergie. Our $4.5 billion Smart Renewables and Electrification Pathways Program, or SREPs as folks call it, that is housed in my department, funds clean energy and grid modernization projects to ensure that all Canadians have access to clean, reliable, affordable, and abundant electricity now and for decades to come. And today I am pleased to announce the latest SREP investment. Today the federal government is investing $16.7 million in IESO's Enabling Resources Program, recognizing that the grid of tomorrow will involve a higher concentration of intermittent power sources, a greater reliance on energy storage, and more decentralized distributed energy resources. This investment will enable the IESO to develop new electricity market rules, operational processes, and IT solutions that are necessary for the efficient and reliable operation of Ontario's electricity system in the coming years. Today's investment, as I understand it, will allow Ontario to support the expansion of both small and grid-scale renewable energy, along with expanded energy storage capacity, which means lower greenhouse gas emissions and a more reliable electricity system and ultimately lower costs for Ontario residents. Cet investissement offrira également aux promoteurs, aux entreprises de services énergétiques, aux consommateurs d'électricité et aux communautés autochtones de nouvelles possibilités de participer au réseau électrique de l'Ontario. And it certainly, I think, will also help Ontario in terms of positioning it to meet the requirements of the clean electricity regs, which are an ongoing series of conversations between federal government in Ontario and other provinces and territories in this country. Today's announcement, building on what is being accomplished at Darlington with Bruce Power, and through our collaborative work at the Ontario-Canada Energy and Resource Table, is another example of what is possible when we commit to working together towards common goals and finding real solutions that address climate change and create economic opportunity. It is another step towards strengthening Ontario's clean electricity advantage and building a cleaner, greener, and more prosperous future for Ontario residents. With that, I want to congratulate this organization on their continued leadership and vision, and I certainly want to thank Minister Smith once again for his ongoing partnership and collaboration. Thank you very much for joining us today. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Minister. We are so grateful for your support. I'd now like to invite Todd Smith, our Ontario Minister of Energy, to make remarks.
Thanks very much, Carla. Welcome to the IESO headquarters, Jonathan, and thanks for your collaboration as well. This is the central nervous system for our electricity grid, and looking forward to taking you for a bit of a tour. We had the Premier here about a month ago for his first visit to the IESO. He was blown away by the expertise that exists within these walls, and learned a lot about how our electricity system works, not just for Ontarians, but for Canada and for large parts of North America as well. The electrons that are generated here in Ontario can make their way all the way to Florida, and the Premier was pretty blown away by that fact. So this is an integral part of making sure that we have stable, reliable electricity, not just for Ontario, but for North America as well. So thanks again. It's great to be back on a stage with you and making an announcement like this one today, and it's great to be joined once again by my colleague, Stéphane Sarrazin, the Parliamentary Assistant for the Ministry of Energy, and the great representative for the riding of Glengarry, Prescott, Russell, where the sun rises on Ontario in the Far East. Listen, the folks that are in this building, they are the experts when it comes to the inner workings of Ontario's grid. And before I do get started, I just want to thank them for all of the work that they do in managing the grid every day, but also planning for the future. The work that's happening here really is so critical to ensuring that we're prepared to meet the demands of a growing province and a growing population and a growing economy. And there's a lot of work ahead in that space. Because over the past 5 years, our government's worked to make Ontario the best place to create jobs and build the industries of the future. And just like the EV automotive sector that Minister Wilkinson mentioned, in 2019, Reuters reported that companies plan to spend $300 billion globally in the EV sector, but none of it was slated for Ontario. And today, just 4 years later, we're quickly becoming a leader in building EVs and batteries with the help of historic investments that have been supported both by the province and the federal governments. That's what working together can do. Over the last 3 years alone, Ontario has attracted over $28 billion in automotive investments. But it doesn't stop there. As our economy continues to grow, so does our population. Ontario is on pace to welcome more than 5 million people over the next decade. Think about that for a minute. It's 5 million, actually. 15 million, we're going to be 20 million by the end of the next decade. It's quite a remarkable thing, so that's why we have a plan to build 1.5 million new homes by 2031 to help meet that rising demand, and with all that growth is going to come increased demand for energy resources as well. Luckily, Ontario already is home to one of the cleanest electricity grids in the entire world, and one of the most resilient, in part thanks to the diversity of the energy supply that we do have in this province. Under our plan to power Ontario's growth, which I released last summer, we've taken a pragmatic approach, one that leverages every part of our energy sector to support our growth. Minister Wilkinson talked about expanding our nuclear resources. We're also talking about expanding our hydroelectric, our natural gas, and our renewable resources as well. But we're also leveraging new technologies like battery energy storage and distributed energy resources that we're talking about here today to help meet that rising demand. In fact, as we speak, our government has the largest clean energy procurement in Canada's history underway. And this procurement is going to secure at least 2,500 megawatts of battery storage, which will support the operation of Ontario's clean electricity grid by drawing and storing electricity at off-peak when power demand is low, and then returning that power to the system at times of higher electricity demand. And that represents enough energy storage to keep the lights on for 2.5 million homes during those peaks. And during the hot weather, we experience our peaks in the summertime when we're using a lot of air conditioning, and it will be available over a 4-hour period. But integrating these new technologies into our grid is going to take some work, and that's why we're here today. That's what the Independent Electricity System Operator has done to create an Enabling Resources program, specifically to make it easier for these new technologies to play a role in Ontario's grid. And today, this investment of almost $17 million by Minister Wilkinson is going to help accelerate that work so that we can take full advantage of the opportunities provided by energy storage and other small-scale electricity resources. Even something as simple as providing the folks in the IESO control room with the real-time data on the state of charge of the new battery storage projects that we're building across the province will help make the system work that much better. So, Minister, I'm really pleased to receive this funding. I told you if you were in town, I'd always be there to put a smile on my face and say thank you, and here we are again at the IESO Control Center. And I do want to thank you for your collaboration over the last couple of years that we've been working together. You know, as we continue to implement our plan to power Ontario's growth, I hope that we have many more of these types of announcements in our province with you and I smiling and shaking hands at the end of those announcements. So thanks again for being here in Ontario today. It was a great day at the Canadian Nuclear Association conference last Thursday with the $50 million announcement for the pre-development work for those 4.8 gigs at Bruce Power. And we really welcome your installment here for the IESO today. So thanks very much. And am I turning it over to Lesley, or do you want to do that? Okay.
Thank you. Great.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Minister. And I would now like to invite our President and CEO, Lesley Gallinger, to the podium to speak to the importance of today's announcement to our organization and our shared energy future. So welcome, Lesley.
Thank you, everybody. Not an easy spot batting cleanup after two such well-spoken ministers. So thank you, Minister Smith. Minister Wilkinson, thank you for coming. In my capacity on Canada's Electricity Advisory Council, I've certainly had the privilege of working with you and your team to determine what's needed to decarbonize and grow Canada's electricity grid. And it's so great to be able to bring you here today to the heart of our grid operations to see how this will unfold in Ontario. The IESO has put a significant effort into developing pathways for smaller and non-emitting resources to integrate into our grid. And we've worked with customers, we've worked with aggregators and utilities, along with solutions providers to unlock that potential, the potential of new clean resources to meet our grid's needs. Our Enabling Resources program will open up new models for emerging resources such as storage, hybrid facilities that have both a renewable and a generation capacity on them, storage on site, and smaller also community-based resources to participate in Ontario's electricity markets. We believe this program is critical to increasing competition, to driving down costs, and also contributing to safe, reliable power on Ontario's grid. And we've made significant progress. Our work to date has given us the confidence to move ahead, to procure over 2,500 megawatts of battery energy storage, some of which will come online next year. Once these batteries are connected, our control room operators will have more options to choose from to keep our system reliable. We will also be able to extract more value from our wind and solar generation capacity on the grid. And this can't be overlooked. As Ontario's electricity's grid expands to meet growing demand, we must be mindful of maintaining system flexibility that strikes that balance between affordability, reliability, and sustainability. And storage is just the start for us. The Enabling Resources program will also help unlock the potential of small-scale, locally based projects that are emerging in communities around the province. We're talking about more renewables and storage, but also talking about the flexibility, building that into the way we consume electricity to contribute to that balance and flexibility. This funding from NRCan will unlock the potential of these resources even further. It will give us the real-time data on state of charge for battery energy storage facilities, so we know exactly how much stored energy is available at any given moment. It will enable smaller resources to be aggregated from across municipalities, improving efficiency and reliability. And it will allow supply as small as 100 kilowatts, such as a solar array you might see on a factory roof, to participate directly in our system. For us, this is important work and it is game-changing and underscores the critical importance of the diversity of our supply mix. So Minister Wilkinson, thank you. Thank you again for your support. The value that we will derive from this investment will pay significant benefits for decades to come. Thank you all for coming.
Okay, final thoughts, and thank you for listening today to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I've been your host, Michael Clogs, and we all have a responsibility to get out there and vote. And a responsibility not just to sit around and gripe about what government is doing, but to actually physically do something about it. It is our responsibility to cast a vote for the people that we think should represent us. We do have a responsibility to write letters to our public officials when we think that they haven't done what they were supposed to do to represent us. And we have a responsibility to voice what we think isn't right and to cheer on what we think is right. At this point, we're seeing those people who are after the greed, the cash grabs, and the power hungry, they are the ones managing to mass the right audience for them to get votes cast for themselves. And it is left up to the responsibility of the community-minded person to get the entire community out there and voting. And I think that is partly the responsibility of those of us in the news media to wake up people so that they go out and vote. Doesn't matter which side or who you vote for, just as long as you go and you cast a vote. That some of the only ways to counteract some of the money and the greedy people is to get as many people looking at the issues that would sit there in their armchair instead of casting a vote, to get them up and voting, get them up and involved in the community rather than sitting there griping about what they think should have happened from an armchair position instead of taking an active position. The more the armchair people that we can raise out of the chairs and into active roles, the better balanced our communities will be. So, if you're hearing this, when you have the opportunity to go out and vote, do so. Please find that subscribe button wherever it may be so you can get continued updates and messages from us here at Depictions Media Radio as we try to promote human rights and equality for all. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.